Hi, this is Chico Resch. You are listening to the Let's Go Devils podcast on the Primetime Radio Network.
Happy Devils Thursday. This is Game Day Live, coming to you from the beautiful Bunker Mobile Virtual Studios here in somewhere in New Jersey. Vinnie Parise in Chicago, streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, Twitter Live, and Twitch on the Primetime Radio Network. We are back, Vinnie, after 8-9 day layoff. I almost forgot how to set up the show. I mean, I'm a little rusty right now. The Devils have been practicing, but they may be a little rusty tonight as the Devils take on the Pittsburgh Penguins in Pittsburgh. They got back-to-back games on the road, one against Pittsburgh, one against the Chicago Blackhawks. Vinny, much has been said the last 32 games of the season, but I think this is going to be something of an evaluation of where this team really stands.
Yeah, and they're going to be playing some good teams. The Metropolitan Division is very unforgiving. The only team besides the Devils in the division that has kind of had a bad year is the Flyers. So when you're playing anybody else in the division, you have a tough task ahead of you, and that's exactly what's going on tonight with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Once again, they're one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. They're going into the playoffs believing that they have a chance to win the Stanley Cup. Their core is still there. Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin and Christopher Letang, they're playing very well. I'm not going to say they're playing as good as they ever have because that would be a lie. They've had 120-point seasons, each of them. But, you know what I mean. They're playing outstanding. And it's a hard team to play against. And like you said, the last 32 games of the season, let's see how guys like Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Sharon Govich, they play against these teams like the Pittsburgh Penguins. I'm excited about it. It should be a fun game. The Devils tend to play well against Pittsburgh, even in games they lose. I don't know why. But they've lost a bunch in a row against them, I think, now. And you kind of understand why. The Penguins are one of the elite teams still. And hopefully they're able to figure it out this time around.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I'm going to be I've actually almost have it finished. I have about 90% done. Written article that's going to appear on Pucks and Pitchforks blog, pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm just waiting for Nick Villano to be like the editor-in-chief he is and make my writing look a lot better than what it really is. But anyway, and I'm going to be talking about addressing what the Devils' needs are. Because there's, number one, goaltender position is the obvious. But how is Tom Fitzgerald going to evaluate where he's got only John Gillies, he's got Akira Schmid, and he's got Nico Dawes. They're playing at the NHL level way ahead of schedule. Then he's got to deal with the fact that Mackenzie Blackwood and his heel situation. Chico Resch was on the State of the Fan address kind of describing his heel situation. I didn't quite understand it from Chico, saying cottage cheese as his heel and it's spreading to the bone in his ankle. I don't know what he meant by that, but I don't want to speculate either. So I'm going to, dig in further what Chico meant by that. But the bottom line is Mackenzie Blackwood's going to be out for a significant amount of time. There's nothing to evaluate other than a bad season that he had to muscle through. That's, post-surgery on his heel. Plus, Jonathan Bernier is another question mark. And as what Chico Resch said yesterday on the State of the Fan address, that you do not want to go into next season with two unknowns. So the Devils' goaltending situation, one would say, well, why don't you get a bona fide goaltender before the deadline? Unless you've got a real number one goaltender with a team that's got two of them and they've got salary cap issues, it's not going to happen. Teams are stockpiling right now. You don't want to be in a bidding war when you can wait to the offseason and figure out your goaltending situation. Also, we spoke about getting a winger, a top six winger that can actually finish and score. And, and here are some of the intangible and has some beef as well. I always love the power forward. I always love guys that can, not only score pretty goals, but also can get the dirty ones, the garbage goals up front, and we can build on Nathan Bastian. We can build on Mikey McLeod. When Miles Wood gets back, we don't know. But hey, you know what? That'll be an extra bonus. Let's just leave him out there, let him recover, let him do his thing. But the one thing that Chico Resch talked about, which I never thought about, is the absence of a true third line, a checking line. Who's going to fill that role? Dawson Mercer is obviously a top six forward. So who is left? Pavel Zacha, but he's on the trading block potentially. A lot of rumors. Brock Ness Monster, Brock Besser could be available. Vancouver's got a salary cap issue. Those are the kind of trades that Tom Fitzgerald's going to do. But, I don't want to spoil the article, Parise, Vinnie. But, I just want to get it out there that you and I and the fans that are watching us should be observing the 32 games because this is they're playing for their jobs. So don't expect tanking. They're either going to, and if they're going to lose a lot of games, it's because they really suck and plus the injuries. But they're not, these players have a lot of pride and they're playing for contracts and they're playing for the future.
Yeah, and you see it with Montreal. They've won a bunch of games. They've won 4 in a row now. Ever since St. Louis got his first win as coach, they've won 4 in a row now, and Cole Caulfield has just exploded ever since he took over as coach. No team at the bottom of the league is going to just lay down and die hoping for the top pick in the draft because it's lottery. We've seen how misfortunate the worst team in the league has been in the draft lottery. Basically, since Austin Matthews went to the Leafs, that's the last time the true worst team in the league won the lottery. And it's tough to see the Devils just tanking. If they make a trade for a good player, I would assume he's young and has term like a Brock Besser that you mentioned. It wouldn't surprise me at all. But they're certainly not going to trade for a rental goalie or anything like that. I don't think they're trying to, climb out of their 20-point playoff hole that they're in right now. I don't know if it's quite at 20 yet, but it's up there. I think if they could get a goalie that will be there long term, then I think something like that could be considered. Like if I know they would probably never trade with the Rangers for a goalie, but like if someone like Georgiev became available because Shesterkin's going to win the Vezina Trophy, that's possible. Not literally him, but like a type like that. I don't know. I think the last 32 games of the season is exactly what you said. See what you got in your guys and see what you need over the summertime once that comes around. And things might start to turn around. We'll see. It all depends on how the players play and the moves they make to, kind of add depth to the team. Because like you said, the lack of a third line has been an issue. I think if you have 3 scoring lines and then the 4th line be a checking line, I think that's something that could work. Like if Bastion and Wood played with McLeod, I think that's something that could be considered. And then you have more or less a top 9 where, like, depending on whose offensive game is going lately between Dawson Mercer and Nico Hischier, you call them the second line. We know what we're going to get from Jack Hughes and whoever's on his wing. So Alexander Holtz is in the pipeline. He was AHL Player of the Month in January, and he's continued it well into February. He's been outstanding, and he seems to have like a clutch gene too, which I like. He scores tying goals. He scores game-winning goals. So I like that about Alexander Holtz. And, yeah, seeing what you have with the Utica Comets in terms of their potential Calder Cup playoff run this year is something to look forward to as well. There's a lot to watch for when it comes to this organization as they head towards those final 30-ish games of the season.
Yeah, and you know what? I know the negativity is coming back. I've been reading some of the social media comments. Fans, I got to tell you, you got to stop with the negativity. What's done is done, right? I've said this, and I truly believe this, and I'm not saying I'm right, but I truly believe this. That 2024-25 season is the target date where this team is out of the dumpster. When Tom Fitzgerald sees the fruits of his labor, the draft picks that he's acquired, created, trading Blake Coleman was not an easy task. He was a fan favorite. Kyle Palmieri, Travis Zajac, just to get those extra picks. Muhammad Doolin, Stillman, that's what came out of it. The Taylor Hall trade. Now, that's partially Ray Shero, all that kind of good stuff. But the bottom line is, look what he did with those pieces from that trade and who he got. Enough said. Because that's what it took. That's what it took to build up that defense. And, when Nick Merkley got shipped, I believe, to get Christian Jaros, hey, he's not a bad 7th, 8th defenseman on your depth chart. He's got size. He can adapt. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Connor Carrick in that role. Because you know what? You can't just – the one thing I can't stand that the game has evolved, because you've got the analytics, you've got fantasy sports. It's all good stuff. But what has happened is everybody plays GM, armchair GM, and thinking that, okay, you could just pluck all these good numbers and put into one, and suddenly you've got a great team. Sometimes it works. But to be honest with you, this is where you need a veteran coach like Lindy Ruff that has an eye and knowing how to nurture and develop young players. Because to me, the thing that money can't buy, the salary cap can't buy on championship teams is chemistry. It's either you got it or you don't. It's not something you can buy. Sometimes you can probably put a Wayne Gretzky, a Mario Lemieux, and a Gordie Howe on one line, but that may lie, even though that would be a dominant line, that line may not win championships. You just don't know about these things. That's the interesting thing about hockey. Is hockey to me is an art, not so much a science. And what we have here, and I'll tell you something, Nathan Bastian and Mikey McLeod is the heart and soul of this team, that fourth line. And I think when Chico was talking about that third line, all I thought about, one of the greatest third lines in Devils history, John Madden, Sergei Brylin, and Jay Pandolfo, that's one. And if you want to go back further, there were times where the Devils were rolling three big centers, and Bobby Holik was on the third line, and they added the toughness to it because, the Bobby Holik and Randy McKay, they kind of evolved. Like Randy McKay was actually on the second line at one point because, he came into the NHL with his fists, but really he had soft hands and he actually could score and skate. So, anyway, what I was trying to get at is that's what I want to see the Devils build, is some confidence and some chemistry going into the offseason. But they really need to address the goaltending position, a score, to basically arm Hughes and Heischer, and you can even say Mercer in that respect, with somebody that can finish. Tatar is just, unfortunately, I was hoping for the best, but he is what he is. That's why he's got only a 2-year deal. So what's nice about these 2-year deals last summer is you could wipe your hands off very easily, and suddenly you got the cap space. So these were actually like good fail-safe moves by Tom Fitzgerald last year.
Yeah, and if they traded someone like Tatar now at the trade deadline or next year at the trade deadline, like I think of when the Bruins acquired Rick Nash from the New York Rangers a couple of years ago. Rick Nash wasn't the Rick Nash that we knew. He was like a shell of himself. And Thomas Tatar is basically at that point in his career. But Rick Nash was able to provide the Bruins with a big body in front. He was able to score like 5 or 6 goals. I think he had a couple playoff goals. Tatar can do that for a team like Colorado or the Leafs or another team that's looking to add something extra, Florida Panthers, going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. So that's where that comes in. I think it's possible that the Devils make a move like that. They also might not. They might just be looking to add picks and prospects for players who are actually worth like a fair amount on expiring deals. We'll see what happens with PK Subban, guys like that, Pavel Zacha. There are all sorts of different ways you could do this. It's definitely not a dead team to watch going into the postseason. They're not going to make it or anything like that, not even come close, but we'll see what happens with the draft lottery. They'll probably have another top 10 pick, which is nice. It's a pretty good draft at the top. Then the depth falls off after the first half of the first round. But, we'll see what happens. Montreal's hot. The Devils, they lose a fair amount of games. Who knows? Maybe even the Devils end with the worst record in the Eastern Conference. That's in play. So we'll see what happens with that. Very
And plus,
much.
just remember those new rule changes. I mean, the Devils aren't affected yet because luckily the NHL had a brain and started that new getting first overall pick. You know, uh, after the clock started after the first two overall picks that the Devils got, Nico Hischier and Jack Hughes. Because I was thinking to myself, wow, they're really trying to screw us, but really they were fair about it, saying that okay, now you're on the clock, so and again, but the one thing though, Vinny, when you're talking about draft picks and you're talking about draft, if you go back to 2017, everyone says like that was the weakest draft class. I'll tell you what, the top 5 and top 6 is, I mean, Cale Makar, he's a pretty good player. You look at
Yeah,
Nico
McCarr would go
Hischier.
one.
Yeah, I mean, Nolan Patrick is probably the bust out of all of them. But you know what? He may
Absolutely.
be a late bloomer. You never know. If he's going to be a late bloomer or whatever. But you really can't predict these things at all.
No, I mean, Pedersen went fifth. McCarr and Heiskanen went third and fourth. Patrick would be the only one bumped out of the top 5. Like, Hischier, you're right, that was a weak draft. Hischier went 1. He's the captain of an NHL team. Patrick, 2, okay, traded to Vegas. He gets concussions a lot. 3 was Heiskanen. He's a star defenseman for the Dallas Stars. Cale Makar, 4th to the Avalanche. He might win the Norris Trophy this year. He's going to lead all defensemen in goals. 5 is Pedersen. I think somewhere in there, I'm trying to think of who Suzuki was in there somewhere. I think Suzuki was 6th by Vegas, and he's sweet for Montreal. So, there's all sorts of good players. Yoki Haru is a pretty good defenseman for the Buffalo Sabres. Vakanainen, pretty good defenseman for the Bruins. So, yeah, I think the 2017 NHL draft was a little bit surprising for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, and you know what? I mean, the hysteria of that draft, it's like that came after Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid. And again, I love Corey Schneider, but had he not been on that team, had that trade wasn't made in 2013, could the Devils had a chance at McDavid or Austin Matthews by having a worse record? Nobody really knows. You can't really
Well,
predict.
in 2015, the Devils had the 6th worst record. If you take Schneider off that team, they probably have the worst record or second worst record. And if you had the worst record, you were guaranteed Eichel because they didn't have the top 3 draft selections yet. It was just the 1. So Buffalo had the worst record. Edmonton comes up and gets McDavid, but Buffalo's consolation prize was Eichel. That could have been the Devils. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah. You know what? Maybe the draft lottery should be this. You get the ping pong balls with the odds, and whoever gets the first overall pick gets the first overall pick, and the rest is followed by record.
That's what it was before this current model.
Yeah. So it's just, and you know what I like? I mean, I'm probably a whiner when I say this. When the Rangers got the first overall pick just recently, it was kind of like the guy staring at the ball and it dropped early. That's how conspiracy theories always start. Gary Bettman always wonders why fans, thinks that that he hates them. And he's mentioned that in past interviews, and he can't understand why. It's like, well, when you pull that kind of crap and the inconsistencies of the NHL, how they rule things, you have nothing else but to think that all these conspiracy theories.
Yeah,
But anyway,
I mean, the Rangers played in the bubble. They played in the bubble with COVID, and they were able to win the draft lottery because they lost to Carolina in the first round. They got swept. So, that was janky. Yeah, I didn't like that at all. But, Lafreniere is a good player. See what happens.
Yeah. And Ryan Mann says the Avalanche dropped in the lottery and got Makar. So, yeah, you know what? back in those days, I remember everybody feeling sorry for Joe Sakic. Joe Sakic, he had like one of the best chances to get the first overall, and you get number 4, and he was pissed. But you know what? Karma. What goes around comes around. He got a great player out of it, turns out. So like I said about the draft, like you can't really predict who's going to go where, who's going to have success. Sometimes freak accidents, freak injuries come into play where you've got a really talented player, but had he not, taken that extra shift and injured his knee, that he became a different player and had to change up his style. Like, you hear those stories all the time. But I would say, this. The Devils are going to get a good pick no matter what. It's going to be in the top 16. They're scouting again. Will they be drafting on need, or are they going to be drafting on best available? Sometimes I think that a lot of teams say that they go for the best available as a PR move. But right now, the Devils, there's some glaring needs. The goaltending position, getting a winger, a scorer, and also keep filling that pipeline of D guys, defensemen. Right now in the system, you've got Kevin Ball, Riley Walsh, Ahoyuk. Those are some pretty good guys that can come in and be big bodies with the big club. Also, you've got Nolan Foote. You've got Alexander Holtz. You've got all sorts of talent. But, once they come up to the NHL level, you've got to replenish Utica. You've got to keep that going. And I hope, and I know Tom Fitzgerald will do this, he's not going to mortgage the future. He's going to really stay patient. And if there's a deal, there's going to be a deal, And it should be interesting what teams are going to offer what. But the Devils, believe it or not, are not desperate. They're not desperate because the worst case is you wait till 2025 hoping that Jack Hughes, 6 years in the league, he should be ripping it up. Nico Hischier, almost 8 years in the league, should be ripping it up. You got Dougie Hamilton still on the team towards the latter half of his contract. And you never know with Dawson Mercer, Alexander Holtz, how these guys are going to fare. And that defense and Mohamed Doolin, don't forget about him because he's still the X factor. Can they get him over here from Russia? I don't know. Luke Hughes, just absolutely just silly good. It's just stupid good. Like, he is so silly good that he's just skating around players, just toying with collegiate players, toying with them.
Yeah, and so did the Devils just pull a Colorado Avalanche? They got, kind of let down by the draft lottery in 2021. And Owen Power is a good player, but he hasn't been as notable with Michigan as Luke Hughes has. And they're on the same team. Owen Power is a year older, has a year more of experience. And Luke Hughes is still more impactful, I would say. I mean, he's probably a better skater. Owen Power, he's going to play in the NHL this season, probably the second Michigan. Unless Michigan makes it to the Final Four and the Sabres are done before they're done, then I think there's a chance that he doesn't play this year. But, I mean, Luke Hughes, man, he's awesome. And he's letting a lot of people know that he's ready to go.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, but I still want him to either stay in college or maybe spend next year in the AHL. But you know what? I think another year in college would do him well. And there's nothing wrong about the college game. Look, you're still dealing with this whole pandemic. Let it subside. Let it go away. Then come up. You don't have to deal with the distractions. You want Luke Hughes' NHL experience to be a lot better than what happened to Jack Hughes. He comes as an undersized NHL player because he just turned 18, and then COVID hits. Then he gained all the muscle. Then he got COVID. Then he lost all his muscle. Then he had to gain it back. Then that freak injury. But now Jack Hughes is back on track. And again, once he starts developing his game and he starts protecting the puck and he becomes a premier two-way player, just like what, when Scott Stevens, not so much a two-way player, but when Scott Stevens changed his game, it changed the entire franchise. And I think Jack Hughes can do that. It's just a matter of time. It's a matter of him learning. But he's going to get there. I can promise you that.
Yeah. Jack Hughes is incredible. He's one of the most skilled forwards the Devils have ever had, and I'm excited to see what he can do. Like, I'm looking forward to this Pittsburgh game, watching Jack Hughes go up against Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin. I can't wait.
Yeah. All right, so predictions tonight, Vinny.
I'm feeling good. The Penguins are a better team. They would beat the Devils 9 out of 10 times. I'm hoping tonight's the 10th time. Let's go into Pittsburgh and see them get a win. I'll go 4-3 Devils in overtime.
Wow. I'm calling 4-2 Devils only because Andreas Janssen said he's healthy. I think he's due to have a good game. I think he's playing for another contract. I think he's playing to make a name for himself on that third line. And he has shown feistiness, although he's got to remember not to take off his helmet during a fight.
Yes, please. Please do that, Andreas.
Yeah. So anyway, those are our predictions. We'll be back tomorrow. Another edition of Game Day Live. Tomorrow's going to be tricky. There's going to be a lot of snow out here in New Jersey and all that, but we'll bring it to you live. Devils After Dark, I got to talk to Scotty. That may have a more of a delayed start just based on scheduling issues. I want to thank all those listening in, watching us from the confines of their own phone, wherever they are, and also check out pucksandpitchforks.com. Vinnie, Parise, and I busting out articles. The editor-in-chief, Nick Villano, busting out articles. Over 5 million hits served. This podcast, the Let's Go Devils podcast, over 250,000 downloads and probably over 500,000 views on our social media pages. Check us out at Let's Go Devils Pod on Twitter, at Let's Go Devils Podcast on Twitch and Facebook, and also on YouTube channel Let's Go Devils. All right, this is Game Day Live. Enjoy the game, everybody. Let's go Devils.